Welcome today, everyone. And I have with me Dr. Sarah Woodhouse, who is actually a trauma expert that is going to talk to us about her new book, You're Not Broken. Trauma is incredibly topical at the moment. There's a lot of misinformation out there. So I'm really looking forward to this chat with trauma, and I hope you enjoy it. Well, welcome, Sarah, and thank you for joining us today. Where did the idea for this book come from? Because you're a trauma expert, what made you say, I need to write this book?
Hi, by the way, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. It's lovely to be here and speak with you. It is lovely. We've been talking off air, haven't we? And it's lovely to speak to someone so informed and engaged in the issues. It's incredible. Where did the book come from? So I'd worked in academia for many years, and we arrived in Australia 2 years ago. I do actually have a lot of academic contacts here up at QU, up at University of Queensland, but decided not to go for an academic grant and instead write the book. And I think there were a lot of kind of personal reasons that led to that. I love academic research. I've enjoyed every moment of it, but I'm also aware of the restrictions in terms of being allowed to speak my truth, I suppose, because when you work in academia, there's a certain language you have to use. You know, I'm a natural writer. I love writing. I've always written. I've had editorial jobs in the past. And you'll know, writing academic research papers is not quite the creative endeavor we might all hope. So I think on a personal level, I just wanted to get back into my writing, and I wanted to start communicating in the way that I love and using my own language and kind of busting out of that kind of academic research world. I was very aware of what was going on in the world. It just felt like the right time for the book. And this was pre-COVID. You know, I didn't know it was going to happen. I don't know, maybe on some level I did know, but it felt like everywhere I looked with Me Too, you know, there was Me Too going on. Black Lives Matter was just kind of gearing up. Trump in administration, and all the pain, irrelevant of which side of that you were on, all the pain that brought with it. It just felt like the right time for the book, and I'm so pleased that I did it then, because it takes a very long time to get a book to shelf. That's the truth. It's a big endeavour and it involves a lot of people. So I'm glad I started then, so that it's available now as we deal with what we are in Australia. You know, there's so much going on, and worldwide. When we look at COVID, I think it's the right time for it.
You talk in the book about trauma impacts us all in one shape or form. And one of the concerns I have is we're all attaching trauma to our lives. You know, I'm traumatized. And you sort of talk a little bit about that, the fact that it is part of everyone. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Essentially, the main explainer of trauma is that it's a reaction to any experience that makes us feel overwhelmed, threatened, and out of control. So really try and get people to hone in on those three things. So rather than thinking about specific events that lead to trauma, those big sort of severe events that we're all familiar with, I'm trying to move that list to one side and saying it's actually any experience that makes us feel that way, overwhelmed, threatened, and out of control. Our message is that we have all experienced a traumatic reaction, and many people shift through it. So they aren't stuck in it today. But if you are experiencing problems today, and those problems are repetitive, then it's worth thinking, okay, well, are the problems I'm experiencing today part of a reaction to something that happened in the past? So it's not that I'm saying everyone's traumatized. It's that I'm saying when we begin to reframe the issues we have today as a reaction to the past, many of us can see the links and make the links for ourselves and begin to identify our own past traumas.
Talking to perhaps a significant event, so it could be something like the floods that we're going through when you've lost everything. It could be, particularly overseas, the awful reactions to COVID and healthcare professionals. We've been taught in our profession as first responders that the most important thing we can do is a proper response to a disclosure. In fact, there are world experts that say a proper response to a disclosure can save someone years in therapy. Just wondering, how people who perhaps say, oh, trauma isn't relevant to me, I'm fine, how they can take on board the fact that they might be fine, but somebody next to them mightn't be. So how you actually relate to people is so important. What do you think?
The key things that I've learned about trauma as I've journeyed and travelled and explored this for the past 15 years is that and I presume that this is what you're referring to as you're talking about that first response to a disclosure. It really is everything. It's giving me goosies as I talk about it because it's so powerful. So we know that if we invalidate a person's feelings and experience, then we're in the trauma zone. That response of not acknowledging, not validating, not understanding, because we've pushed their feelings away. What do you think they do? They push their feelings away by saying whatever, it doesn't matter, or pull your socks up, or come on, get over it, whatever it might be, whatever form that invalidation takes. We almost provoke and prompt the traumatic reaction. Best thing that we can do for those around us, whether we understand trauma or not, the best way we can support the people in our lives and anyone in our lives, whether their loved ones or not, is to validate their feelings and validate their experience. And that simply means if somebody comes to you saying, I feel really frightened, just say, I get it. You look really frightened. Like you validate, you repeat back to them what they're feeling. I see you, I hear you, I understand. That's our mantra. I see you, I hear you, I understand. So everything we're communicating has to be making them feel seen, heard, and understood. And children need it, and adults need it, and we especially need it if we have experienced or are experiencing an extreme reaction to a frightening event.
It's a really great segue to what we were talking about offline with what's happening in Australia at the moment and indeed the world. We've had COVID come out of nowhere. We were all locked in our houses and couldn't go out and frightened of an unknown assailant, so to speak. We've had bushfires that destroyed lives and they're still recovering. There are people on the south coast still living in caravans and makeshift homes. We've had floods, and then of course we've had this massive uprising around Parliament House. Knowing that we've got a collective trauma, and is there some first steps that you think we could work towards? I know it's a big question, but for me, I feel everyone has to bring their expertise to bear and start to offer some intelligent conversation around this. You can't just have people telling their stories and it going nowhere.
I also think focusing on how we support each other and understanding that as we speak about these things publicly, we all stand, we're all likely to be triggered. That's the truth. These are very difficult things to discuss. So I think laying that on the table and saying, we need to take care and you need to understand what it feels like in your body when you're triggered and how you might react. Because as you say, this cuts across everything. You know, you can be the Prime Minister and you can get triggered, and you can be me sitting here and get triggered. It's all of us. We are all humans. We are all at risk from this reaction. And actually, that's the wrong phrase, because it's not a risk. It's part of being human. The trick is to understand it, you know, compassionately understand. Because the thing that I've found through my work, I've had so many people say this to me, is I think because I am so very aware that most often the things that make us overreact or react at all in life, it's often when we're triggered. It's often when something very painful within us has been set off. We've been reminded of something from the past and we're triggered. And when you come from that kind of that point of reference, it's very, very hard to not find compassion. It enables you to interact with any human, observe their behavior, and not forgive it, not say it's all fine. I obviously would always expect people to take responsibility for their behavior, but always find a point of compassion and understand why, whether we're in the, you know, when people are in the media or not, they may be reacting a certain way, because these are very difficult things to talk about, and that's just the truth, and there's no point pretending otherwise, you know, and we have to support each other through this.
How do we know we're being triggered, and how do we buy ourselves some time and pause our nervous system so we can get through that moment, even when we're in action? You know, when we say we're, you know, up on stage, what do we do?
Is action and reaction. And that's what I would be urging people to focus on. We can feel strong emotions and not be triggered. You know, the emotions themselves aren't bad, they're not wrong, they don't indicate that we've been triggered. The point is, I suppose, about control. So if we are acting from a place of grounded connection, we're in the moment, our feet are on the floor, we're connected to our bodies. We all know that feeling, right? It's hard to explain, but I think we all know that feeling of strength and grounded connection when I am in the moment and in my body. And we can feel a whole heap of stuff when we're in that space. We're not triggered when we're in that space. When we react and overreact, we are out of control. The reaction pops out of us. In the act, we are out of control. The reaction pops out of us in the way that you saw with Scott Morrison when he went for the journalist. That was a reaction, you know, and that's where I would be beginning to use the terms triggered. And I would be beginning to say, okay, well, what's going on? And if people are wanting to understand if they are triggered and how that feels, really it's about those sort of uncontrollable reactions that bubble up in us, and the reaction might be verbalized, or it might be an emotional one. We might just feel it internally, that our body reacts, our emotions react, or we might feel it cognitively, our thinking suddenly starts spiraling, but it's the reaction versus action. So when we suddenly feel our body react, I would say.
You talk in your book about some signs of trauma, and one of the ones I think I found interesting was often the memory, the chronology is a bit out of order. You can't sort of put it all together. Can you sort of just give us, I mean, there was a long list, but can you just give us some of the signs that perhaps trauma is impacting your life?
The way that I recommend people think of it is, so you've got the cognitive symptoms, you've got the physical and emotional symptoms, and you've got the behavioral symptoms. So you've kind of got three big clusters there that you can look at. And if you take the physical and emotional first, because often that's where we feel the trigger first. So we're triggered, we're reminded of something, and often we experience it emotionally and physically first. And that might be a feeling of shame, anger, fear, frustration, loneliness. There are many ways that feeling can embody, that we can experience that as, and it will come with a load of physical sensations, right? Because we feel our feelings in our body. We don't think our feelings, we feel our feelings. So it's going to come with a lot of physical sensations like a racing heart, anxiety, being easily startled, those kind of things. And that's all linked to what's going on in our nervous system. So that fight, flight, freeze response has been set off, and we experience it physically and we experience it emotionally. And the reaction happens in a spiral. So the first thing we're going to experience is that physical and emotional, and then we're going to experience it cognitively. It's very likely we will, because we've got that flood of hormones that's going through our body. And of course, that goes through our brain as well, our mind as well. So we're going to experience a lot of different cognitive symptoms as well. Confusion, rumination, extreme negative thinking. A lot of people's old self-beliefs are triggered, sort of negative self-beliefs are triggered. But that's a piece of the puzzle that often people miss, but it greatly affects our thinking. So you've got what's going on in your body and your emotions, then you've also got the reaction that's kind of really affecting how we think. So we can't think straight. Essentially, that's what I'm saying. Your prefrontal cortex is not working in the way that it usually would because of all those hormones. So the next sort of part of the cycle is the behavioral response. And this really is the part of the picture that often keeps us stuck in the symptoms. So we've got the physical, emotional, and then everything that's going on in our mind, and we react to try and cope, usually in some way. So we lean on a coping mechanism, and for the vast majority of people that are stuck in this loop, those coping mechanisms are avoidant. So what that means is they are all designed to push the feeling away, push the thoughts away. So that's anything compulsive busyness, compulsive eating, compulsive shopping, compulsive, and add a word at the end, and that's where we are. It's also any controlling behaviors, or extreme, and compulsive busyness, where you're kind of moving and trying to avoid the stillness, avoid pausing and being with the feeling. It's all about pushing it away. And because that behavioral response sits at the end of this loop, it kind of keeps us stuck in the loop. So it's inevitably, over time, it's going to lead to worse emotional reactions or more cognitive symptoms. We kind of get stuck in this loop of symptoms. And the thing we need to do is move towards our feelings, notice them, cry, allow our feelings and be with them. But because we're pulling away from them, we don't do what we need to do, which is let the reaction out and therefore become stuck in it.
So that's a really good segue. What do you do? How do you manage that? Because I know I've often, had a good cry and I feel better afterwards. It's almost cathartic. What are some of the things that we can do?
That's so wonderful. And it's that simple and that difficult. The first point of all of this is to pause and notice. Insight and awareness is everything. That, yes, of course, if people have PTSD or if they have extreme trauma symptoms, there's a different response. But if we're looking at sort of how trauma shows up on a day-to-day for people who aren't experiencing that diagnostic level of trauma, it's about insights, it's about awareness, it's about educating yourself so that you know how it feels when you're triggered. So what triggers me and what reaction does it provoke in me? And those insights alone can bring huge healing. They can be the doorway to, or almost the springboard to, huge healing and growth. So the first really is about observation and becoming interested. When are my reactions set off? When am I overreacting? What am I overreacting to? It's piecing it together. I mean, this really can be a game changer for our relationships in particular, I would say, or our working life anyway. What reaction are you repeating? What and therefore what pattern are you repeating? It's looking for those repetitive reactions and repetitive triggers. So the first piece of it really is all about becoming aware and acknowledging. And then the second piece really is about noticing and allowing our feelings. There are so many different tools, and I cover 7 of them in the book, but I think the one, if I could urge people to really take notice of and take from this, is just the most simple idea of pausing, noticing and acknowledging how we're feeling. So it might be as simple as, I've been triggered because my partner just hung up the phone. I'm triggered. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm feeling frightened. It's acknowledging that we've been triggered and stating the feelings just to ourselves. I'm not saying you need to make a call. I'm saying just pause and acknowledge the feelings and then notice what they're doing. Where are they? How's your body feeling? Are you tense in your jaw? Are you feeling in your tummy or across your shoulders? So it's making that link always, because trauma is about a separation of mind and body. It's bringing the two back together. So it's a really important piece of the puzzle. So we notice how we're feeling, we acknowledge it, and then we observe how it's showing up in our body. And we just allow it, which might sound so simple, and I know that it is, but we are all programmed to push away the uncomfortable. I feel uncomfortable, push it away. I feel afraid, push it away. That's how we are all programmed. And when we're in the trauma zone, when we're talking about this stuff, that therein lies the problem. That is what's keeping us all stuck in these old reactions. So to free them up and free yourself up, you have to begin allowing your feelings to flow, no matter how uncomfortable they are. And once you've done that, then yes, we can begin to reconnect to the moment, to our adult self. Because trauma disconnects us. We're thrown back to the past, right? When we're triggered, we're thrown back to a younger version of ourselves. So we want to, after we've allowed the feelings to be, we then need to reconnect with ourselves today and the moment today. So there are loads of different grounding techniques that people can use for that, to bring themselves back into their body and back into the moment.
I'm really angry about that email. Rather than just hitting back a reply, stand up, make a cup of tea, think about why you're angry, and sit down and then write the email. Like, it's give yourself space rather than react. Or alternatively, when you've just let go at a press conference, for example, afterwards reflect, thinking, I didn't mean to do that. What was going on for me? You know, I got angry at someone. Reflecting on it. Would you agree with that?
All personal growth involves us admitting when we're wrong, admitting that we misspoke, admitting that we reacted in a way that we didn't want to. And for some people, that there's so much defensiveness around that, they find it extremely painful. So that's probably the first piece of the puzzle, is you have to be willing to own your mistakes. You have to be willing to take responsibility, because we can all stop these patterns. But it requires taking responsibility and being able to admit mistakes, which is something I've always been very good at. It's just always come very naturally, because I want to grow, I want to learn, I want to be better, I want to be happier, I want to grow, you know. But I'm aware that not everyone comes with that mindset, which can make it very hard. But yes, the way that you've just articulated it is perfect. If we're trying to pinpoint our own triggers and our own trauma, our own unresolved trauma, we're looking for repetitive, strong reactions. It's not necessarily every reaction, but it's repetitive, strong reactions. So if you find yourself reacting in the same way during the same type of situation, then I would begin to say, okay, look, it's feasible that this is triggering, it's reminding you of something that happened in your past. But also the example that you gave, you know, I felt angry before when I opened an email, is wonderful, because these are techniques that we can all use every day. Because whenever we're reacting, we're not in control. Whenever we're reacting, it's coming. And I've heard so many therapists say this, any reaction comes from the subconscious. You know, it's not coming from our sort of present conscious grounded self. It's coming from back there. You know, it's coming from the past, in which case we all want to pause. When you feel that reaction, the best thing that we can do for ourselves and the world is pause, breathe, notice, and reconnect before we move forward. 100%, yeah.
So I guess when you move forward and live a life that you're not carrying this bag of trauma with you.
At the three things that I just covered there. So beginning to be aware of our triggers and our reactions, beginning to pause, notice, and allow our feelings, and then allow our feelings to flow. I would say that's, if people can do that, that's an incredible start. And of course, there are some people that need more. I needed more. You know, many people do. And what you'll find is, and what I've found with the people that I've worked with, is for some people, these techniques that they use at home is absolutely enough. It makes them aware of the sort of unresolved trauma that they're carrying, these issues that from the past that are still affecting their day to day. And they find it relatively easy, maybe that's the wrong word, but with help and support, they can certainly break out of these cycles using tools at home. But for many people, it's just the beginning. You know, they begin using these at home and they want to go deeper. They want to learn more. They realize actually there's this thing and it just keeps showing up, and it's and I need to do more processing. I need more help. And I certainly did. You know, I've tried every different trauma treatment under the sun, and I would urge people to do so. You know, there are incredible, creative, powerful treatments out there, and there is absolutely a treatment for everybody. That's the thing. Go where you feel comfortable. Go where you're led. Go. So for example, somatic experiencing is an incredible treatment that's all to do with rebalancing your nervous system. As the word somatic implies, it's all about the body, rebalancing the nervous system and releasing traumatic energy. That's, essentially what they're doing. I tried it. How long ago? Maybe about 20 years ago, maybe a bit less than that, probably about 15 years. And I just didn't like it. I couldn't do it. I wasn't ready to do that kind of body work because I was very detached from my body. I've dissociated often, and I needed to do really, really gentle body work with a different type of body work that basically was about gently being able to observe and notice what was going on in my body, because I was completely disconnected. And since then, over the past 7 years, I've done so much SE work, and I love it. I absolutely love it. It's been a total game changer for me. And so I'm using that as an example of what's right for me might not be right for someone else. And also there are different things that we'll need at different times, and that's okay. So go where you're drawn. Someone listening to this might absolutely love SE right now. Someone else, it might not be for them. Someone else might like working with a clinical psychologist. For someone else, it might be working with a therapist. Someone else, it might be EMDR, someone else CBT. There are so many different treatments, and I'm so grateful that there are, because we are colourful, unique humans, and what resonates with me won't necessarily resonate for you. So there is no one size fits all, but there is certainly enough choice. And if people go where they're drawn to, literally what they're drawn to, what excites them, what interests them, they will find their way through, and they can have incredible healing and incredible growth.